They told her she didn't belong there. A 23-year-old intelligence analyst with nervous hands and a folder full of intercepted communications that no one wanted to hear about. The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and old leather, and every set of eyes in that room belonged to men twice her age who had seen war up close, who had earned their stripes in blood and sand. She stood at the head of the table, heart hammering against her ribs, and when she began to speak, Colonel Hayes didn't even look up from his paperwork. He just snorted, a sound that cut through the silence like a blade, dismissing her before she'd finished her first sentence. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that tucked between her trembling fingers was something that would change everything. Her name was Lieutenant Emily Carter, and she had spent the last 6 months buried in signals intelligence at a desk most people forgot existed. While soldiers trained and strategists planned, she listened to static and whispers, piecing together fragments of conversations that traveled through the dark. She had flagged something 3 weeks earlier, a pattern in enemy communications that didn't fit, a rhythm that suggested movement, preparation, something big. She had written it all down, cross-referenced coordinates, highlighted inconsistencies, and when she brought it to her commanding officer, he told her she was seeing ghosts. But Emily knew better. She had grown up the daughter of a cryptographer, had learned to see patterns where others saw chaos, and every instinct she had screamed that they were missing something critical. So she kept digging, kept listening, kept compiling her notes until they became a dossier she couldn't ignore. And now she stood in front of the most important officers on the base, trying to convince them that the mission they were planning was walking straight into a trap. Colonel Hayes finally looked up, his jaw set like granite, his eyes cold with the kind of authority that didn't need to be spoken. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice flat and dismissive, "we've been doing this since before you were born. I don't need a desk analyst telling me how to run operations." The room shifted uncomfortably. A few officers exchanged glances, but no one spoke up. Emily felt the heat rise in her chest, felt the weight of every doubt she'd ever carried pressing down on her shoulders. But she didn't step back. Instead, she opened her folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward him. "Sir," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "with all due respect, this isn't just my analysis. These are coded orders from the Pentagon." The room went silent. Colonel Hayes frowned, reaching for the paper, and as his eyes scanned the lines, something shifted in his expression. The arrogance drained away, replaced by something sharper, something that looked a lot like alarm. The document was stamped with clearance levels most people in that room had never seen. It was a direct communication from Defense Intelligence, confirming Emily's findings and adding layers she hadn't even uncovered yet. The enemy wasn't just mobilizing, they were coordinating a multi-front ambush designed to cripple coalition forces in the region. The mission Colonel Hayes had been planning, the one set to launch in 72 hours, would have sent 200 soldiers directly into the kill zone. Emily had tried to warn them based on her own work, but it was this paper, this official validation, that finally made them listen. The colonel's hands tightened around the edge of the table, his knuckles white, and when he looked up at her, there was no sneer, no dismissal, just the heavy realization that he had almost made a catastrophic mistake. What happened next unfolded like a tightly wound spring suddenly released. The mission was scrapped. New intelligence was disseminated. Units were repositioned, routes were changed, and the ambush the enemy had so carefully prepared collapsed into nothing but wasted effort and confusion. Lives were saved, not in some dramatic firefight, but in the quiet, unglamorous work of listening, analyzing, and refusing to be ignored. Emily didn't get a medal right away. She didn't get a parade or a speech. What she got was a nod from Colonel Hayes as he passed her in the hallway 2 days later, a brief acknowledgement that carried more weight than any ceremony ever could. "You were right," he said simply, and then he kept walking. But that nod, that moment, it told her everything she needed to know. Months later, when the dust had settled and the base had returned to its routine rhythms, Emily received a commendation. But the quiet persistence of showing up, speaking up, and refusing to let the truth be drowned out by pride or protocol. She kept that letter in her drawer, and on the hard days, the ones where the static felt endless and the work felt invisible, she would take it out and remember that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with guns, but with information, intuition, and the unwavering belief that every voice, no matter how young or uncertain, deserves to be heard. Years later, when Emily had climbed the ranks and was training a new generation of analysts, she would tell them this story. She would tell them about the colonel who snorted, about the room full of doubt, and about the piece of paper that changed everything. But more than that, she would tell them to trust themselves, to dig deeper when something felt wrong, and to never, ever let anyone make them feel small for doing their job well. Because in the end, war isn't just won by the soldiers on the front lines. It's won by the people in the shadows, the ones who listen when no one else does, the ones who see the patterns and refuse to look away. And sometimes, just sometimes, those people save lives without ever firing a shot.